While the world has been focused on the war in Iran, the war in Ukraine has been quietly entering a new phase. And joining us today to talk about it is Dylan Burns. Dylan is a reporter that has been on the ground in Ukraine for the past few months or years.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time to be today on Roxham TV. I know you just got back from the front. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you're doing?
Sure. So I've been here since April of 22. So I've adjusted to this type of work for a while now. But at the end of the day, the war's different every year you come back. There's adjustments, there's new things you have to look out for. And this year is very heavily drone dominant. I was on the Druskivka Konstantinivka axis. I'm filming the ending of a documentary there where I was on the front line for a year, filming a lot of the action and activity on that front, just as I had on the Pokrovsk axis before with my documentary a year on the Pokrovsk axis that came before that. So I'm trying to get an idea of what the front line's like, and it's constant drone coverage, constant movement for infantry, hiding under tree cover, hiding under buildings. There's drones just about every minute, 2 minutes, you'll see one or you'll hear one and you'll have to take cover. There were a few close calls. There was probably, I don't know, 15 or 16, 17 interactions we've had with drones, and like 3 or 4 where they were directly going towards us. So anybody having to work on this axis, whether you're an aid worker, whether you are military personnel, or whether you are a journalist, you have to deal with this constant threat. And the drones generally don't make much distinction. My good friend and aid worker by the name of Eugene, he's been hit 7 times, and I do mean 7 times, while working on the Donetsk axis, most recently getting hit, leading to the death of an 83-year-old woman and a 64-year-old woman when they were being evacuated. So I would say this is the most violent front of the war. But in Kherson, you can find the human safari. In Sumy, you have civilian destruction. And on the Zaporizhia axis, constant fighting. And so, I mean, the whole front line is still in a blaze, and the air attacks only increase in size. And so when I'm like listening to DC and I'm having this adjustment where I'm getting back into the political world, I'm listening to what people said about the war while I was on the front, and I hear the Speaker of the House saying, "Oh, I hear the war is winding down. I hear the war is, it might be coming to a conclusion." And it just feels very disconnected from the frontline reality that everybody has to live with.
You touched upon a few questions that I was going to make there. Thank you so much for the overview. I was actually going to ask you what has been different, in the last time that you were in the front compared to the other times. And if I understand correctly, that's the increasing presence of drones, would you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, drones have been a constant reality for a while, but I remember my first embed when I was just getting used to this type of work. It was my first time really doing military journalism. We had been spotted by a drone. I had heard a drone. And then there had been a scream that there's a drone. And for 15 minutes, the Territorial Defense Brigade, which is basically locals who had picked up guns, and then the government had given them a sticker that says, "We are part of the military now," and they're getting adjusted to military life. They run into the forest, and for 15 minutes, they're like, "Okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to get in this car? Are we going to move in this way? X, Y, Z." Nowadays, if something like that was to happen, you'd be hit by a drone in about 1.5 to 2 minutes if you were spotted by a reconnaissance drone. And that's being generous with time. That's assuming that there aren't already drones in the area that are just going to happen upon your position. So the reality from the start of this war to now, it is a complete monumental shift in drone technology. Drones have been used in Middle Eastern conflicts by even groups like ISIS back during the Battle of Mosul, just like with tin cans, dropping grenades out of it. But now we have the mass industrialization of war. We have mass involvement of AI in these weapons, where at the end stages, if you're jammed, that might not matter if you jam the drone, because the AI technology has been trained like video game software to use the last 3 seconds to go after you, to get you. And so if you have some drone jamming tech, that might not be enough for you, where at the start of the war that might be enough to save your life. So there's been a big transformation in the scale of this, and the advancement of the technology, and the industrialization of drones and warfare. It's impossible to be on the front line and not be harassed by these things almost 24/7.
And how do you deal with that? Because you mentioned Eugene, and I know that he's a fixer that you're with, that he knows the ground better than you do, if that's correct. How do you deal with, paying attention to him or following your instincts or your journalism, desire to cover the news, but also staying safe?
Eugene's a friend of mine. He's like a local religious aid worker, compelled by God to go do stuff on the front line. But that's just a friend. My fixer was Bogdan. He shot down a drone on this last trip with me. That drone was 10 meters from my head. It zoomed straight past me and him. He shot it down, hit the ground. We were very lucky in that instance, but we were being guided around by a very experienced cyborg, somebody who fought in Donetsk airport back in the day, back in 2014. So they're a very rare breed. So we were very lucky having very intelligent operators who knew the environment, who knew how to stay safe, and somebody who was a press officer with them who knew what they were doing as well, and they were armed. But it was impossible for me to operate there without those types of people. I'm not going to go into these environments with people who have just joined the service, not because I don't respect those people, but because I've been doing this for going on 5 years now, and you can only take so many chances, you can only take so many risks, and they have to be measured, and they have to be in a way that preserves your own life. So I only go out there with people that I know, that know the environment, that know what they're doing, that they have tons of experience, and they're where I know I'm willing to make the risks necessary to get the story. And in this case, I think Konstantinivka deserves a ton of attention. It is a community on fire now. It is a community being killed in front of everybody's eyes, and it is absolute tragedy because the people there are very resilient, very resilient.
Now, I want to ask you, before we go deeper into the war, I want to understand, how did you, an American from Maryland, get into covering the war in Ukraine? What made you travel there in the first place?
I think it was just the terrible coverage. I remember hearing there's not going to be a war. There's no war. It's not a possibility. This is ridiculous. This is fear mongering. It's not going to happen. And the same people who said that were immediately scrambled for as experts on the war and for sources on the war, not people who were living it, not people who had seen it, not people who had, I think, honestly, anything of value to say, but largely people who got it really wrong. And those people who got it really wrong then proceeded to say, well, the war will only last 2 to 3 weeks. The war will be quick. Ukraine will be crushed. And I mean, some of them would even play into old Russophilic type ideas of, oh, well, these are the same people, so ultimately they have the same mentalities. And it's like you're watching like an old 1930s Bugs Bunny cartoon for your like geographic knowledge of like, oh, well, those people have bones in their noses, and those people all X, Y. It's like, it's actually like bigoted to an extent, the views that were being thrown at Ukrainians. So I think that just the terrible coverage made me think, well, I can at least go and speak to refugees. And so my original plan, and this is what I told my lovely grandparents, is, I'm just going to go to Warsaw and interview refugees. Well, Lublin is near the border, but it's not in Well, Lviv is in Ukraine, and then it just got closer and closer and closer because these are just such lovely people. I understood that, there was no way to get a deeper understanding unless I went and I saw the war myself. And I come to realize that adage that, journalism is the first draft of history is really true. And that if there isn't somebody there to document it, then there will always be there will be people that deny it. I remember in Kherson, when our aid boat that we were working with was hit and bombed by the Russian army, they went online, posted footage of my good friend John Jones getting hit by mortars, as elderly British aid worker getting bombed. And they say, oh, they're all Azov, they're creating a bridgehead on the other side of the border. They're doing XYZ. They're these like super soldiers or whatever. It's just like complete nonsense, despite the fact that, we had tons and tons of footage. And if it wasn't for the fact that there was so much footage on the ground showing their aid workers, showing X, Y, and Z, then there wouldn't have been this information to counter the lies that are being said at the time. And so I just think there should be as many camera angles of what's going on here as possible.
100%, and it's very appreciated that you're there, and you actually filmed the documentary about Russia's human safari, the drones targeting civilians. How do you know that what you're seeing is deliberate targeting versus collateral? And how do you film this without you yourself or your team being endangered?
It's impossible to be in Kherson without being in danger. I mean, the Russians, if they give an evacuation order, if they happen to do it, the way they do it is like, okay, the evacuation order is half of Kherson. Good luck, right? That's honestly how it works. And mind you, it'll be like an hour beforehand. A lot of people don't get these evacuation orders. They're only like distributed on Telegram. It's not like they don't distribute it in all the different avenues. It's almost as if they're trying to cover their bases, and they don't even really bother often covering their bases. But then you'll watch the footage that they release. You don't even need to look at my footage, honestly. Okay, my footage is just one perspective of a very big war. Their footage that they release shows their missiles like missing by half a mile, falling short into the like river constantly, where they're just hitting like everything they possibly can in a general radius where there might be military activity and there is probably a soldier somewhere in that direction. That seems to be the way they approach artillery. Within 48 hours of the Novokakhovka Dam being exploded, they were already resuming bombing Kherson, and I met tons of aid workers with just wounds that they had patched up and gotten straight back to work because people, elderly people, disabled people were drowning in their homes due to the flood waters that were racing. I saw like homeless people with horrible gashed head wounds from the bombing as they were trying to and those people don't get a lot of coverage. What happens to a lot of these most vulnerable people and like the worst of circumstances who literally, like, to them, leave to where, right? That's the question that they always ask, leave to where. But they just continued to bomb and bomb and bomb. But the worst part of the human safari is the fact that the Russians are just so blatant in the way that they do it, to the point of putting like music over their war crimes and making music videos out of civilian tragedies, where they'll be bombing ambulance drivers, they'll be bombing firefighters, they'll be bombing. The way it works is they'll bomb a civilian, ambulance drivers will come to help the civilian, the ambulance drivers will then be bombed, the firefighters will come in their fire truck in order to put out the fire so the fire doesn't spread to more homes, because people will burn in their homes. They come to put out the fire, and then they bomb the fire truck as well. They've bombed tons of just city workers, like garbage truck drivers. And it's gotten to the point where we're talking about, like, when we say like the worst atrocities that have happened in Europe in recent memory, you go back to the Yugoslav civil wars, like the snipers of Sarajevo, the numbers of civilians that are getting killed by the human safari is rivaling and exceeding these types of numbers. And it's happening with basically next to zero coverage. There's only a small group of local journalists that are constantly pumping out information. And whenever I can get over there to work, but it's an extremely difficult environment to work in, and you don't get a lot of clicks on the internet. And so it simply does not get the coverage that it deserves. But in Kherson, the Russians hunt civilians, make music videos out of it, and then get fundraising money off.
That was actually going to be my question, and you kind of answered it, which was like, why do you think larger media organizations that do have journalists on the ground are not focusing more on covering the human safari that you're talking about? And do you think it's because of what you said, like it's not as clickbaity and it's very dangerous?
I'm gone. Honestly, I'm less respectful about it. I don't think it's mainstream media. I think it's alternative media. I think it's the entire institution of media. Whether you're talking about CNN and mainstream news, whether you're talking about YouTubers, whether you're talking about podcasters, people who do constant news coverage, that is their job, and they cover world affairs. They just generally don't talk about it. It gets little coverage because it gets little clicks, and the same institutions that drag down mainstream media and created a lot of the alternative media space, which is, oh, they only cover what's profitable, oh, the advertisement, it seeps into the coverage. It's happening to alternative media too. They only publish whatever gets the most clicks, whatever the most recent war is, whatever the most recent event is, whatever the most clickable headline is. They look at the API. A lot of these channels, I swear to you, your most trusted names in alternative media will go look at that stuff before they'll actually look at what should inspire your outrage. And it's the sad reality that it looks like even if you go to alternative media sources, this type of coverage is going to be bare and hollow. And the few channels that do cover it, I give them all the credit in the world. I appreciate that Roxham TV is covering it. But at the end of the day, it seems to be media wide because it simply doesn't make money.
100%. And at Roxham TV, we've also been covering like the effects of only following clickbaity stuff and just generally people not even caring if something is real or AI generated. So definitely appreciate you coming on the show and your efforts documenting everything. And I want to ask you, because according to reports that I'm seeing, Russia is being pushed backwards on the battlefield, but we are seeing like a serious ramp up in attacks. What's your take on what the situation is there? And do you see a clear winner at this point?
I don't define like I don't look at the war as who's winning right now, who's losing right now, because it's a question of winning where, losing where, towards what goal, towards what end, right? If you're talking about is Ukraine winning in the idea that they're going to take back Crimea in the immediate future or anything like that, the counteroffensive everyone's talking about, we're talking about one town. We're talking about one town that was taken on the Zaporizhia axis, and there's been other towns that have been taken and then lost again, taken and lost again, also on that axis. It's a very violent axis. I haven't been there recently. That's going to be one of my next trips because I need to understand what's going on there because of all the reporting that's coming out. But again, that one town being retaken happens to be in a very vital point that the Russians had spent 8-10 months trying to take, and the Ukrainians took it back in a very short period. But that also puts the scale of some of this fighting in perspective for the amount of bodies that are being created over the size of the territory that is being fought. If you go to the Konstantinivka axis, the city is being slowly enveloped. The Russians are penetrating deeper and deeper into the city with infiltration teams. That means groups of 2 and 3 that are usually snuffed out in a basement when somebody throws a mine down there. It's not usually like these big European style. Back in World War II, you'd imagine like, I don't know, there's 2,000 men for like a kilometer front line or some image in your head of 1,000 men. We're talking about 15 men for like a kilometer or 2 kilometers of front line. Like that's not a lot relatively when it comes to like European interstate war standards from World War One, World War Two, the most recent examples. But when you talk about these urban centers, these are the areas like Konstantinivka the Russians are trying to infiltrate in, and they are having some success. When I was at a stabilization point recently, looking at people who had lost their legs due to butterfly mines, these really pernicious tiny weapons that got a lot of notoriety in Afghanistan because children used to mistake them for toys and pick them up and lose an arm. But they hide in the deep grass. And when I was walking out there in Druzhkivka for 22, 25 kilometers, something like that, you have to walk because the trucks drag the most attention. And I saw that with one Jeep going by on fire. What happens when you decide to choose the quick way instead of the slow way, and what might ultimately be the safer way because you have more knowledge about your surroundings. The high grass, it is pernicious for those types of mines. But one of the people who had been wounded by that, they said, oh, I saw Russians, they saw me, we were just both confused, we waved at each other and then walked the other direction because of the chaos that can happen in a lot of these infiltration tactics where people end up and hold positions where a Russian position will be here, a Ukrainian position will be behind it, or then it'll go vice versa, and in the infiltration tactics cause a lot more chaos, but also a lot more Russian casualties because they're literally just saying, you go, 2 guys go that way. Hopefully later that'll amount to something, and hopefully it'll build up to something. So it's really sick.
Yeah. Just today, I saw news that nearly 500,000 Russians have already died so far in the war in Ukraine, and I guess that what you're explaining right now makes a lot of sense as to why. Um, Going to the politics of it for a little bit, I know that Keir Starmer and the Polish PM Donald Tusk have signed a new defense and security treaty against Russia, and the treaty identifies Russia as the most long-standing threat to Euro-Atlantic security. And I'm curious. Who is seen in Ukraine as its most staunch ally right now?
Um, Ukrainians. Uh, I think the Poles are viewed as a strong ally, but there's a lot of like ethnic tension and like nationalist sentiment that sometimes like can tear at that and what people consider unaddressed historical issues, because obviously there were a lot of atrocities in the history of inter-European relations. I'm saying this as an American, as an outsider, so I don't want to speak too much to that, but I think a lot of times it amounts in questions about Ukrainian refugees staying in Poland, questions about the grain deals and the agriculture of Ukraine and whether it's going to undercut local farmers, and then that goes more into the economics of the relationship. But Europe has the most at stake, And I would say out of all the countries that I hear Ukrainians talk about, I never heard a bad word about the Baltics.
Okay, that's good to know. And regarding peace talks, it has been on and off for over a year. Alaska, Geneva, Abu Dhabi, the 28-point plan that Trump proposed. From inside Ukraine, what do soldiers and civilians actually believe about whether any of this will actually lead to a real settlement?
I look, when I'll try my best. When I was walking back from Druskivka, I saw like some graffiti. I saw two things graffiti that stuck out to me. Soldiers will write graffiti all the time. Sometimes they're just shouting out their cities. Sometimes they're just shouting out their football teams. You know, sometimes they're just having fun drawing little things or whatever. But other times, you know, people get philosophical when you're in a trench all day thinking about what you're gonna die for. People or not die for, you want to live for, but you know, you might die for. People, you know, go out and they try to share some of this sometimes. And I saw one was like today Donetsk, tomorrow Kherson, Zaporizhia, the next day like Odessa. Like the idea that first you offer this, then you offer that, you keep offering stuff up, they'll just keep coming back for more. So there's this framework of if you tell the Ukrainians to give up land for peace, then you're ultimately just asking the Russians to come back for seconds and thirds and fourths, because that's what happened after Crimea. That's what happened after 1/3 of Donetsk and Luhansk was taken, and that's what's happening now. Trying to take the rest of Donetsk and Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Next, it'll be Kharkiv, and then it will be Odessa, because Putin's ideology is all of it belongs to Russia. He said it before the war started when he wrote a big essay, and Putin is like a redditor when it comes to writing history. I mean, he just rants and rants and rants and goes and goes and goes. He said that Ukraine could only exist in two states. One is as an extension of Russia, and the other was not at all. And so they'll come back for seconds. And the other thing is when it comes to these like negotiations, I mean, 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. It's just, come on, come on. That's
Yeah,
my commentary.
we've seen that in
Come on.
Iran for the past 3 months. Yeah, 100%.
And I don't know what you want from me.
No, no. And I also want to ask you, like, what you're saying right now about soldiers and people in the front lines being quite not at all enthusiastic about conceding to Russia because of its history of then just coming back and taking all of it. Are people still? I don't know that a good word for it is motivated. I don't want to be insensitive in my wording, but yes, like, is there a strong belief that as you said, what they are fighting for, whether
There
dying
is
for,
honestly.
yeah.
I met a lot of people who really do truly believe in what they're doing. I mean, everybody I'm seeing in recent training camps are conscripts, and so there is a different vibe when it comes to the people who volunteered early in the war and the people who are being conscripted now. But there is also a wider social acknowledgement that there's not really much of another choice, and so conscription, while the behavior of the Tetsaka and the mobilization forces leaves much to be desired, to be blunt, there seems to still be a general social acknowledgement that what other option do we have for national survival? Because they still view it as it is, in my view, a war of national survival by an entity that would like to see it be subsumed into a larger power, a power that has historically banned their language, that's historically suppressed their culture, killed their artists, killed their poets, killed I mean, their higher social society that develops the culture, establishes the culture. And so they feel that they're fighting that war of survival. So there's not really much of a choice, and that's always been the case, the general social view. But recent successes in the long range drone campaign, the idea that 3 days has turned into Russians, please go to your bunkers, is a very big shift, I think, in Ukrainian society to see that. And when you see the social media videos coming out of Russia, it's a big shift for Russians as well. They see drones going over their apartment buildings on their way to attacking a petrochemical plant, or to an oil refinery, or a artillery factory, or a drone factory. And it has, I think, changed the psychology of the war somewhat. And it has encouraged Ukrainians to think that if they can bring the war back to Russia and undercut what supports it, maybe they can force the Russians to actually have to end the war. Not to mention the fact that the Russian advance on the front line has slowed to a crawl, very slow.
Thank you so much for that, Dylan. And what's next for you? Like, do you think you're gonna, I know you mentioned there's another region, I forget which one it was that you want to go now
Zaporizhia,
next to.
Zaporizhia.
Yes.
But
And
I just need to get back out there. There's just so much
yeah,
happening at any one time, and I try to spend like rotations in the country where I'm home for half the year, and I'm like here for like 6, 7 months out of the year, because I just have family affairs at home, and I want to make sure that I can see my recently widowed grandmother, and like just stuff happens in families. So and you want to be there for that. But I want to get back to the next front, the next front as front as sorry, the Donetsk front as soon as possible, because the Russians are pushing towards Kramatorsk. They're getting within artillery range of Kramatorsk. They're bombing the eastern side of the city, and this is the largest unoccupied city, and it's of course it's twin city Slovyansk, still unoccupied. It is the beating heart of the rest of unoccupied Donbass, of all these people that have been continuously displaced from the Donetsk region, and this city of 150,000 people is now under threat of being destroyed building by building, room by room, block by block, until the Russians take it. And it is getting worse rapidly, and I think it deserves attention. I don't know if the world will give it that attention, but I know it deserves it, so I want to be there as well.
Dylan, and before we have to say goodbye today, I want to ask something that we kind of touched upon it briefly, and you just mentioned it now. But what is something I guess you would want people that are watching right now that maybe haven't been following the war as closely, or don't follow you yet on your socials? What is the focus that you would want them to take on the war? Because even though it is happening in a specific region, this is collectively something we're all allowing to happen in the world. Do you have any comments for them?
Yeah, just that it can always get worse. The situation can always deteriorate. The situation can make, if the Russians were able to push through Kramatorsk, or the Ukrainians were by some diplomatic magic trick were tricked to give up their unoccupied territory that is the most defensible. What we're talking about, what's left in the Donetsk region, is the fortress belt. It is something that the Ukrainians built up specifically to stop the Russians from digging deeper and deeper to the country. If they gave that up, or it was taken, they could then push deeper into the Kharkiv region, which the Russians also view as theirs. Then they could go further into other regions like Dnipro. They could get in artillery range of these cities. And when it was worst for Kharkiv, when it was its absolute worst for civilians, when my friends lost their fathers, not in rifle battles, but like older men just smoking on their porch, getting like torn in half by bombardments. When that was happening, that was when they were in artillery range. If that happens for Zaporizhia, if that happens for Dnipro, if that happens for Kharkiv, you could quickly see Ukrainians become the most displaced people on the planet. It would be an absolute catastrophe. So while it can always get worse, the situation can always get better, but that is yet to be seen, because that takes actually wanting to apply yourself to get it better. And obviously you are at home, so I don't know, donate to a charity, go turn off your lights, go get a better light bulb. I don't know.
Dylan, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and our audience about what's happening in Ukraine. How can everybody keep up with your reporting on the ground? Where can they find you?
Sure. So I write for offbeatresearch.com. I'm going to be publishing some articles about mid-range strike drones, which is a quickly developing technology in Ukraine that is straining Russian logistics really bad right now. If you look at gasoline prices in occupied Mariupol, or if you just look at the road trying to go to occupied settlements in the south, it is strewn about by destroyed Russian vehicles, 90 kilometers, 100 kilometers, 110 kilometers from the front line, because this technology is continuing to develop. And I'm also going to be publishing a series of tank articles called the Tank Diaries with them as well. My documentaries, though, are on Dylan Burns TV. This Saturday, I'm releasing a documentary about air defense in Odessa with the Navy. So we're out on the water with the guns, talking about how they stop these gigantic drone attacks from attacking Ukraine. So Dylan Burns TV on YouTube for my documentaries.
That's amazing. Thank you, Dylan. I will tune in on Saturday to look at that. And again, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure as well.
Guys, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching Roxham TV. If you can, please do like and subscribe, and we'll be here tomorrow at the same time. Thank you, Dylan. It was great having you on. Thank you so much for all your yeah, all your accounts. Like that sounds freaking insane. It's on a personal level, thank you so much for being there and documenting all of this.
Hey, I love my work so much. I appreciate that I have the ability to do it independently when I've seen so many people here like straddled with like terrible like mainstream media contracts that restricts where they can go, restricts what they can do. They don't have any freedom in their coverage. And just a lot of people losing their jobs because it again just doesn't get the it doesn't get the traction, which is again why I appreciate just talking about this for any period of time.
Yeah. 100%. I hope we'll be in touch again soon, and maybe we can have you back on whenever you come back from the front again. That would be amazing to check in on the latest on your end. But again, thank you so much for coming on. It was great meeting you.
It'll be probably sometime mid to late next month. If that'll be next one. I'm back.
Amazing. Yeah, that would be
and same place as last time, and I'll try to be there.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.